Do you enjoy interactive author discussions? Well, welcome to Story Behind the Story with Reese Ryan, where romance readers and authors connect. I'm Reese Ryan, author of sexy, emotional, grown folks romantic fiction featuring characters finding love while navigating career crisis and family drama. And this week's discussion centers around the importance of body diversity and body positivity in romance. And I'm excited that I have not one author, but a trio of authors that are going to be joining me today for the discussion. And that's Leigh Carron, Kayla Grosse, and Taj McCoy. We're going to be talking about why body diversity is important while we incorporate it into our stories. And as always, we will be sharing a list of some of our faves so that we can contribute to the busting of your TBR. And if one thing I always want to do is introduce viewers to new authors. And so we're going to do that today for sure. So before we get started with that, welcome and thank you so much for joining us. If you're new to the show, welcome. It is a very interactive show. So we encourage your comments and your questions. And when we get to it, your recommendations. So you're free to do that in the chat and we look forward to it and we will address them sometimes on the screen as we can during the show. If you are joining us from Facebook, don't forget to scroll down to the bottom of the description if you haven't done so before, and then give StreamYard permission to see your Facebook avatar and your name so that when you're joining the discussion, we'll know who we're talking to. And if you're new, don't forget to subscribe. And if you enjoy the show, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and share it so that other readers can find it as well. So before we get to chatting with our authors today, something I was going to tell you. Oh, if you came from the newsletter, my newsletter that went out about 5 minutes ago. After the show, don't forget there are cover reveals in the newsletter for the project that I'm doing with Jules Bennett, Dynasty's Willow Vale, that's happening later this year. So I have the covers for both of those projects if you haven't seen them before. And all 4 books are available for pre-order. And of course, my latest release, Return to Hummingbird Way, is out. So if you haven't read Brett and Sin's high school hate crushes forced to work together to plan their friend's wedding and a matchmaking grandmother who is hilarious and I just adore, don't forget to pick that up. It's available at retailers everywhere. So we're going to get into it. And again, if we encourage your questions and comments as we get into the discussion and meet these new authors. So we're looking forward to it. So without further ado, I'm going to start bringing the ladies on. And I'm going to start in alphabetical order with Leigh Carron. How are you, Leigh? How are you doing today?
I'm great, Reese. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
And then next we have Kayla Grosse. And if you haven't seen her amazing illustrated covers with a plus size heroine, you're on Twitter, I don't know, your head's in the sand or something because it's been everywhere and it's been on a bestseller. She's been like a bestseller for the longest with it. So welcome, Kayla, and thank you so much for joining us. Oh, are you frozen?
Looks like Kayla's frozen.
She might be frozen. We'll get back to her as soon as she's on again. As a matter of fact, maybe I'll take her off and put her back and see if that helps.
Gotta love live.
Okay, there you go. Are you there? There you are.
There she is.
Okay.
Now I'm back. I was like, of course, ready.
Your
intro.
So how's it going? Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me in my horrible internet.
No worries. And a warning to everyone that it's going to be a thunderstorms here in my area. So just in case I disappear, carry on without me. But hopefully, the internet will behave, and so we'll be fine. So that's great. So next we have Taj. Well, I'm going to try to get to her. There you go. All right, Taj, welcome and thanks for joining us today. Oh no, is she frozen?
No, I think Mike is off.
Okay, there you go. Is your mic not? Is
Oh,
mic?
there we go.
There you go.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, so good to have you. Okay, so I'm glad to have all of you here, and I'm gonna just dive into first getting to know all of you all. So I'm gonna start this time with Leigh. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you write.
Well, first of all, I'm an American living in Canada, so that's a little bit unique. I'm actually from Cleveland, Ohio, like you, Reese. So we've got that in common. But I'm now living in Calgary, Alberta. It gets cold here. We're talking minus 40 frigid, cold. But that's actually given me an opportunity to stay inside in the winter, and I've been my most productive self here in terms of my writing. So, it's good from that standpoint. Mainly I write steamy romance with a hint of a suspense, and my books are always diverse, whether that's in race or body, that I like to bring in my own experiences and what I know. And so that's really important to me, to offer as much diversity as I can in the stories that I tell.
Love it. Love it. Thank you for being here. And Kayla, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you write.
I am, an author. I live in Los Angeles, California with my bird, Fiero, and I just bought a horse too as well.
Oh, cool.
So, so I live out here, and I've been writing. I started in film, like doing screenplays and things like that. And then my friends were working on some nano books and said, why don't you write a book? And that's kind of how my book journey began. But I recently, last year, I published my first book with a body that looks like mine. And it took off, and so now I just wrote another book. So my books are very much about celebrating the body that you're in and love it any size, and also dealing with kind of the realities of life. Like, I like to write about things that actually happen in life, not just, off in fairy tale land, even though I do like fairy tale land.
Yeah. That's fun. And that's kind of how I got started with writing fiction as an adult too. Like, seriously, with the idea of writing to be published is NaNoWriMo. A friend had recommended to me because I was doing copywriting at the time, and a friend recommended that to me. So that's pretty cool. And Taj, who is, well, I'm not going to say it. I'm going to let her tell us about it. Taj, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you write.
So I'm Taj McCoy. I'm from Oakland, California. I currently live just outside Washington, D.C. I have been writing since I was a little kid, and it's always been a passion of mine. And so about 5 years ago, I started in earnest trying to pursue traditional publishing. And my first novel was published last year, Savvy Sheldon Feels Good as Hell. It's centering a plus size protagonist. And all of my books really have, body positivity, good food, and Black love at the center of each one. I think that's really important for me to kind of bring voice to. And so that's what I focus on.
I love it. And did you mention that you're an agent as well?
I didn't mention that, but I can. I'm also a literary agent. I'm also a higher ed consultant. I'm also a private chef.
That explains. I knew it. I knew it when I was reading Savvy Sheldon that you had to have some experience as a chef, because just the way that is written, it is definitely written like it was written by a chef. So, okay, that is very cool to know. Okay, so next question, I'm going to take it in a different order this time, just to be fair. So let's start with Kayla this time. Tell us a little bit about your latest release, and give us a little bit of the story behind the story, on the characters as well as the premise of the story.
Yeah, so my new book is my first time writing a cowboy romance novel. And I have So it's called Rein Me In, The Cowboys of Nighthawk. So it's going to be a series. I'm going to write his brother's book next. The book centers around Blake, who is a plus size ex-barrel racer. And she left town 5 years prior after the tragic accident of her brother and his death. And she is now returning home to help her parents out around the ranch. And of course, she meets a cowboy who also is about on the brink of losing his ranch due to drought and other things. So, and his brother, it deals with a lot of different themes of alcoholism, grief, loss, depression, but then there's also a lot of spicy scenes and fun scenes. There's a mechanical bull, multiple scenes with that. And just the town itself, the town of Randall, it's got a lot of really fun characters. I realized after I wrote it, it's like all the women are curvy except for the moms, which I thought was funny. But yeah, so that's my newest release, and I really was inspired to write it, because I wasn't really finding curvy women, plus size women in cowboy romances, at least the ones that I was finding. I'm sure there's more out there. I read Sierra Simone's Misadventures of a Curvy Girl, which was kind of like a farm, not really like, but I ride horses, and there's a lot of stigma against fat people riding horses, especially like if you look on TikTok and stuff, when you see a larger person, the comments are horrendous. So I was like, you know what? Like fat women deserve to be cowgirls. Like they are cowgirls, you know, and get love. And then I lost a really dear friend to cancer and my grandfather suddenly. So the grief was a really big, like that really inspired the storyline as well.
Wow. Life often inspires stories, doesn't for sure.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. Okay, so next I'm going to go to Taj. Tell us about your latest release or upcoming release, and give us a little bit of the story behind the story on these characters and the premise of the story.
Sure. I'm kind of in a weird situation. I'm like 2
Between.
weeks after the release of one book and 2 weeks in front of the release of a second book. So,
right. So tell us about both, actually. So let's start with Zora. And then we'll talk a little bit about the anthology.
Zora's my lovely one here. Zora Books Her Happy Ever After is based in Washington, D.C. Zora is an independent bookstore owner who has a crush on an author who's local. And during the course of a book event that she hosts for him, she also happens to meet his best friend, whom she ultimately also starts to date. And so she's caught in this love triangle where her best friend and her meddling grandmother are both trying to impress upon her the need to choose someone and just ride off into the sunset and be happy. But she finds that as she's dating these guys, she thinks they're hiding something from her. And so she has to uncover what that mystery is before she can determine who her happy ever after will be with. And so it's a great ode to DC. There's a lot of different landmarks that we hit along the story, but it also sheds light on bookstore owners and shows them some love as well, while still having that plus size protagonist who really does just own exactly what size she is, loves herself, and is confident in every way. And so she's kind of different from Savvy in that way. And then my anthology is Even If the Sky is Falling. That one comes out on May 30th. That one is 6 stories. I have 5 friends contributing to it. And basically the premise is, imagine that, a few years from now, there's a series of meteor showers that threaten to run into a bunch of space junk and cause it to plummet toward Earth. Global citizens come together and demand that global leaders create a siren system so that they know when to go and hide. And so as the U.S. is implementing their part of the system, someone accidentally shorts it out and the entire U.S. has to bunker. And during that time, my team is the NASA team, and my main character, Haley, is stuck with her ex being assigned to her team, and kind of a crackerjack bunch who are trying to fix the system so that they don't get fired. Meanwhile, there are couples all around the country who are stuck together. Some are strangers, some are rivals, some are in the process of communicating feelings, and you get to see what they think, what they do when they believe that the world might be coming to an end.
Wow.
It's such an interesting premise, and it's fun that you got to be not only a contributor to it, but you're the editor, right? Of
Yeah,
of
it
the
was
product.
my idea, and
Yeah.
so I'm a big fan of disaster movies, and so it just makes me think of Twister and Dante's Peak
Right.
and Volcano and all those ones where you're rooting for this couple and hoping at the end that they're together, but you also just want to see a little bit more of them, and a little less of the disaster. And so,
Right.
yeah.
I love it. I love it. Very good. And Leigh, tell us about your upcoming release.
Well, I have my current release. If I could just
Sure, absolutely.
give a shout out to Dee and Mick there, because they're characters that I've been living with for a long time in this series, and I love them. And as I wanted to sort of suggest with this title, The Naked Beauty, it's really about kind of uncovering your layers, sort of stripping yourself and being laid bare and being loved for who you are and accepted for who you are, hence sort of that naked beauty. And it's not just for Dee, who is a plus size woman who's kind of coming into her own, struggled as a teenager, which I completely relate to, having had body image issues growing up, being a yo-yo dieter, all those things that I know a lot of women can relate to. So can my character. But it's really about her journey, and as much as I created her, she actually inspired me through this story as she kind of comes into her own. And of course, she has a love interest. It's a second chance romance, and Mick is wonderful, and he's loving, and he's supportive. But that's not what brought her kind of to her own place of strength. She was able to do that on her own, and just made better because he loved her so much. And in this story, there's also some suspense. We've got some abuse issues with Mick in terms of what he's had to deal with. So he's got some uncovering to do too. It's not just her journey, but his too, and them together. So I've really loved this series, this duet, and for my next book that's coming out at the end of June, I've veered off. There's still characters from that story, but now some of the favorites are going to get their love story. And this one is not a plus size character. There's diversity in it, though, of course, because that's what I love to write. But she's actually a former athlete, former tomboy. And I was inspired actually by my daughter, who's an athlete, and by just reading about Serena Williams and some other athletes, that top female athletes that, despite their talent and how amazing they are, struggle with this, oh, she's too masculine, she's too muscular, and so I wanted to write a story about this woman who is muscular and fit and strong, and did struggle with sort of that whole issue about feeling feminine enough, and her journey around that. And she is one tough chick. I love her. She does not mess around, and anyway, she was a great character to write.
Love it. And just to go back and go through, I put on some of the screen some of the hellos, but just to welcome some of the people who have joined us, like Uzu and Jennifer Copeland, Mama Tony Bonita, Veronica Lockett, Monique Fisher-Hay, Ola Lawson, Angela Anderson, who just got through chatting with Elle, and author Dion White. So thank y'all for joining us, for everybody for joining us. I appreciate it. Before we even get into the next question, one of the comments that I wanted to highlight, Reclamation Yoga says, just listening to you all speak gives me inspiration to include more body positivity in my illustrations, to include bodies that look like mine. And I love that. That is the whole point of this conversation. So that makes me super happy. And I'm going to mark this other one from Scott Reagan. That's a really great comment too, and we're going to get back to that. as a matter of fact. So I'm glad that you made that comment, Scott. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. So I think I got all three of you just then on that question. So, okay. So the next question I'm going to ask, I'm going to start with Taj this time. At what point did you realize that incorporating body diversity and body positivity was going to be a crucial part of your brand as an author, and why is it important to you?
I think I just kind of made my initial character plus size unintentionally, but it was just like, that's how I see myself. So that's how I want to see my main character. And part of her journey mirrors something that I've been through. And so it was kind of easy to kind of put her in that body. After working on Savvy, I think as I started to fashion together the proposals for my next books, everybody was plus size. And I just wanted to be able to do that kind of unapologetically so, because I feel like, especially when it comes to readership, readers are voracious. And, you give them one plus size book and then they're like, okay, great, but where's the rest of them?
Right.
And so, like, you just have to keep going at some point. And for me, it's just recognizing the fact that, so often when I find a writer that I really love, I immediately go to their backlist and want to read everything that they've ever written. And so, I want to make sure that, the kinds of stories that I know that I would want to read are out there and available. And so I just keep, for me, it's about fat joy. It's about Black joy. It's about Black love. And that's my brand.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. And next, I'm gonna go to Kayla. So, Kayla, same question. At what point did you realize that you wanted to incorporate body diversity and body positivity as a crucial part of your brand, and why is it so important to you to do so?
Yeah, I think so. The very first book I ever wrote is called Wish Revelations, and it was a new adult contemporary romance, and it had like very, or it has like very Twilight-y kind of characters, like, the plain Jane, like brown hair, and the guy's blonde, sandy blonde hair, and because that's like what I was used to consuming, and I was used to reading, and I had this this sort of this self-hatred towards myself that was like, I can't consume media with anyone that looks like me, because then I'm never gonna not be fat. And it's like this weird thing. And then I had this journey of self-love actually while I was writing Wish, and then for the last couple of years, where I've really come into myself of body acceptance and loving who I am, and experiencing my first relationship. And then while I was in that relationship, I started to read plus size books, and I was like, wow, these are great, but like all of them involve losing weight, or like needing a man's validation, or like this, after the prologue, she's on Weight Watchers, and I'm like, I don't want to read about this, I want them to like be strong and healthy, because they are happy with themselves, not because of what they're eating. And so I wrote I Like You Like That, which is a rock star romance, and she's the rock star. And, so she is.
I love that twist too.
Yeah. And she's, that was another thing too, is like reading all these rock star romances. And I read one where it was like the assistant was curvy, and I was like, well, what if Rockstar was? And Cass Elliot is one of my like favorite singers. I've always loved her, and I was like, what if she was alive today? Like, what would she be like? I feel like she would be unapologetic. She would say like, this is who I am, and I am here to do music, and people who love my music will listen to my music because they love my music, not because of how I look.
Right.
And so that was really my inspiration for Birdie's story. And then it was really cathartic for me to write. And then the response from people was just like crazy, and I was not expecting it at all. And was helping other people heal from their body image issues. And so I was like, this is my calling, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is how and I think I'll just keep writing that because that's who I am. And it was nice because now with my new book with Blake, she's just Blake. She's plus size, and that's it. There's she doesn't reference her body really. She's just existing in her world, and that's kind of how I think I'm going to continue to write my books.
I love it. I love it. That's a great story, and I'm so glad that you seemed to be cathartic for you, and also you kind of discovered, hey, this is the brand that I want to do. I want to have, as an author. So that's awesome. Mm-hmm. So Leigh, what about you? Was it intentional for you to have like body diversity as a part of your author brand, and why is it important to you to include that?
Well, I mean, I relate so much to what Taj and Kayla were saying, because I think it's true that when I sort of sat down to write my first book, and again, it was unintentional. I wasn't even knowing what I was going to write. In fact, I hadn't written for so many years, and it was my husband who said to me, "Hey, how come you don't write anymore?" And you just life gets in the way, and I didn't really think of sort of being an author as a career. So I had this career, and that seemed like something kind of that you dabble in, not really sort of do. And so when I sat down to write a story with his encouragement, not thinking I was going to publish anything, just I wanted to kind of get back to my passion, and the story just came to me, my first book, which was D, and my first story. And of course, just like what Taj was saying, it was just a reflection of kind of who I was, what my experiences had been, and it kind of just came on the paper. And I had struggled so much, as I had said earlier, with body image. I went on my first diet when I was 14 years old, and starved myself for 30 days. And then I got all this, these accolades about, oh, you look so beautiful, you look great. So the message to me was, so thin must be better, because that's where I got kind of all of that reinforcement. And it took me a long time to figure out that, I love me for me, and size is just a size, and, it really doesn't matter. But I know a lot of us struggle with that, and it is a journey for many to get there. And I wanted to have that reflected in the story, even though I did it sort of unconsciously. Initially, I think because it was really there, sort of percolating inside, that kind of came out, and it was, as you were saying, sort of this cathartic experience. And so that, I've just wanted to continue to raise the voice around, sexy not being, or beauty not being defined as as any kind of size, to love, your own self and your skin, and your body, and all of that. That's really important to me.
Love it. Excellent. And so I'm going to dive into a few of the comments here. First, Tanya Brown River says body diversity, acceptance of one's self-image. And that's just another thing. Like, I was thinking, for anyone who's wondering or might be 100% clear on, what we're talking about with body diversity, we're definitely talking about all different types of body types, because on romance novels for years, what we only saw the same kind of body type, right? The same skinny, beautiful, whatever body type, or what most Western media considers to be beautiful or to be perfect in terms of body shape and stuff. And we definitely are seeing more of a difference out there. Now we'll talk a little bit more about that, but definitely that's what we're referring to. But it doesn't just have to be plus size. Also, like, it can be somebody who's super thin, or, in Romancelandia, it's always like the tall, dark, handsome guy, right? So what if he's not tall? That's something I've started to dive into a bit, is writing heroes who are not super tall. All those things include are encompassed by body diversity. And okay, so there was another comment. Okay. And okay, so this is actually, it says Scott Reagan, but this is actually Mary Margaret. And this is, I was made fun of for being too thin most of my life. I love the idea of plus size women on covers. There needs to be big, thick men on romance covers too. I love big, thick men.
Me
So
too. Me too.
I love this, and I'm glad this is brought up because this is one of the things I wanted to make sure that we address too. Because we think of it in terms of often we think about body diversity in romance, we right away think of like a plus size heroine, but also, we want to see more plus size heroes too, or maybe that super skinny guy who got picked on all the time. Whatever, all these different body types being included into this whole sweep of what body diversity looks like and body positivity looks like. So next question I'm gonna ask you all, and this time I'm gonna start with Leigh again. So we're seeing more books with plus size characters gracing the book covers, and this is a question for the viewers too. We're seeing more books with plus size characters gracing the covers, but do you see it as an awakening in the industry, or as a bandwagon that the publishers are jumping on, or is it a little of both?
Well, I mean, I think any kind of diversity that's out there in a positive way, like I'm all for it. So, you want the motivation to be authentic. That's always best. But honestly, like if the more that it's out there being repped in a very positive way, I don't want to be critical of it. Do I think that, some people see it as a trend and are jumping on that bandwagon to just make some money? Of course. I mean, whenever you have something that's working, you're always going to have that. So we definitely see that happening. But I think, I have been very impressed with the number of authors that are coming out with some very wonderful stories that are very pro body. And as Kayla had mentioned before, that they don't just have to talk about the body itself, just being there. You just happen to be a description. It's just a description of your body, but the story doesn't have to center around the fact that that you're big or small,
Exactly.
whatever you are,
Yes.
right? So
Right.
I think that we're seeing a lot more trending in that direction, and I really love that too.
You make an excellent point right there. That whole idea of just because the character is plus size doesn't mean the story needs to be about the character being plus size. I think that is very important because it kind of reminds me of the thing. Well, I'm not going to go into it. That's a whole other story. That's a whole other show. But yeah, that right there, I feel is a big issue, and I feel like for just like the whole thing with Black trauma, where some publishers. So see, I did go into it. I did do it.
That's okay, girl. Go.
I did say it. But so just like the thing of Black trauma, I feel like some publishers feel like they can only do a Black story if it's going to mine Black trauma, as opposed to saying, hey, we can do all of that. We can do the fluffy and the cute and happy and Black joy, like Taj mentioned earlier, as well as these stories of trauma. So it's the same thing I feel like with plus size characters or people with different body types, that it doesn't necessarily have to be a story about that issue. It's going to color, how they view the world, of course, just like being Black colors how I view the world.
Right.
But at the same time, the story doesn't have to be about that. So
or not solely anyway.
Exactly. Okay, Taj, do you feel like it's an awakening in the industry that we're seeing more plus size covers like your beautiful covers, or is it a bandwagon, or is it a little bit of both?
I think it's kind of, honestly, I think it's a reaction to demand. I think, Julie Murphy, I have one of her books right here. I think she had Dumplin', and people loved it so much that I think publishers were kind of like, let's test this out. Let me bring on one author to our imprint that kind of fills that space and see what happens. And I think that there has been such a warm reception because there are so many women's bodies that are now being represented that I think now it's like, oh, well, it's kind of obvious that we need to do this. Are some of the publishers bandwagoners? Maybe. But has it been an awakening? Probably. I think the real thing is, like, can we keep it going, or will they, as Leigh mentioned, will they make it a trend? And the hope, I think, is, as long as we have plus size bodies, we should have plus size representation.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And Kayla, what about you?
Yeah, I definitely agree with Taj as well, and a lot of that. I mean, I feel like too in the indie author world, sometimes I'll see like certain TikToks or something, and I'll like kind of like cringe a little, because I feel like you can see through the bandwagoners, like, if that makes sense, because there's always going to be the bandwagoners, because they're going to see like, oh wow, like I see what those people are doing. And you kind of tell by their marketing, because then it's always like her plus size body, her fat belly, her this, her that, it's like it's always like driving home the image of their body over and over again. Versus like the people who are genuinely, I feel like, are like, these are important stories that deserve to be told, whether or not the book focuses on their weight loss, like problem. I mean, not weight loss problem, their history with all of that kind of stuff, or how that affects them in their real life, or if it's just how their bodies are, But so I could definitely see it going both ways for sure.
Yeah. And Reclamation Yoga says the same thing, probably a little bit of both. I would agree with all of you on that, probably a little bit of both. But I am very glad to see it. I'm glad that we've been seeing it for some years now. It's not like one book or 1 year where we're seeing a bunch of them, but I think we've kind of seen more and more of them. I do know for myself personally, I feel like every single one of my characters that I write, I describe them as being curvy or whatever. And when I turn in that artifact sheet, I'm like, that person is not what I would describe as curvy. You know what I'm saying? Except for that one book that I have that where, we talked about the character being plus size. And so for me personally, it's something that I know in my head that, okay, going forward, I need to be more specific to say, hey, if this is what I want, I want a character who is considered, plus. But even it's funny how with that kind of, how we can kind of have a kind of discriminatory way be discriminatory in the way we think. Because I remember writing Kids Until Midnight, which is my story that has a character on it that's plus size. And even with that, there were people like, well, I don't consider that plus size. It's just, you just never, it's just like, ugh. So, but yeah, I definitely know that that's something that going forward that I've been thinking about more and more, because like I always consider you can go back and look at almost every single one of my heroines, and I describe them as curvy, but I just don't feel like the person necessarily on the cover has the curviness that I was looking for. But yeah, because you definitely want to have that representation, because I've been thickums all my life. Okay. So I definitely want to write about people who are, reflective of my experience, getting their happy ever after as well.
I think sometimes it's also, when it comes to the covers, are they illustrated or are they photos? Because I think for those of us that have the illustrated covers, a lot of times it's a lot easier for us to weigh in and say, you know what, no, go back, because her hips, her thighs need to be, like, give me the yams. Like, let's not play around with this. Like, I really need to see that curve right there. No, her arms need to be proportionate with the rest of her, and it's harder to do that when they're portraits.
Especially, I'm glad you mentioned that, Taj, because that is actually a big deal, because when it comes to body diversity, or just kind of any diversity in who the character is, because I found this with one of the things I did start to say very specifically, for instance, was this character is a dark-skinned woman.
Yeah.
So because I felt like no matter who I gave as the inspiration character, I still kept getting this same kind of tone of color of people. And I'm like, okay, so I had to start saying very specifically that this is a dark-skinned woman. And it's the same kind of thing, I feel like, a lot of times, because I did sometimes get a chance to look at possible models. And I'm like, I feel like sometimes it's very limited, the pool of models that they're looking through in terms of body types and skin tones and things like that, then definitely makes it more challenging when you have a photo cover. And Lord, don't be an indie person trying to use stock photos. Stock photos
brutal.
Are the friggin' worst.
The worst.
No diversity,
Absolutely.
hardly any Black people.
Yeah.
And if they are Black people, it's hard to just like the basic things, like
plus size is
happy couple in the garden,
sexy, right? And just
you're not going to find
Yeah.
Black people in that setting, and or plus size people
Yes.
in that setting. So that is very challenging when you're doing it. So it does make things easier when it is an illustrated cover, and you can do those things.
Mm-hmm.
So excellent point. Let's see. Next question. Okay, so I'm gonna look really quickly. Don't encourage me, Veronica, because I'm always running my mouth and saying things that I probably should not be saying. So, thank you. Thank you for the support, just the same. And Mary Margaret says, thank you for reading my comment. I love your novels, all four of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you
for being here. We appreciate you. Okay. And Mary Margaret also mentions Donna Hill, Brenda Jackson, Monica Jackson, and Frances Ray have short stories about curvy women and give sizes like 14 or 16. That's something interesting too, because I normally never say a specific size.
No.
I just talk about a person being curvy or whatever. And in one book very specifically, the hero was like, thank God for every ice cream sandwich, piece of cake, or whatever she has had in the years since I've seen her, because whoo, I'm loving these curves. So, but I never put a specific number to it. So I'm wondering if that's something that any of you do.
No.
I don't think
I just never think about it
like that. Yeah. What's interesting though? I do notice that in some books, like they'll say like the character has an internal dialogue or something, or they'll say like my size 16 ass or something like that,
right.
And I've had actually a lot of readers like comment on my TikToks and stuff, asking me specifically what size my characters are, because they don't want to read plus size books that are about size 12. They want size 18 and above. So what's your, so they'll specifically ask me, and I'll just tell them like, I don't name their sizes in the book, but in my mind, this is how I picture them, size 18, size 20. But they're not, you can picture them however big you want, however small you want.
I'm with you on that. You make that determination, because I know I've been criticized with, you're a fat girl's not even fat.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what do you mean? I haven't said a size, but just by the description that she gives of herself, if it's more positive, it's not seen that she is, a larger size, when that's not the case. That's your own bias sort of that's factoring in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. That is very interesting. I'm glad you mentioned that about the size, because like I said, I something I had never even considered doing, saying what size. And I feel like maybe part of that for me too is, in all of our minds, what size is, or what's considered plus size or whatever, is different to different people or whatever. So
1000%.
Yeah. So that's interesting.
And it's also shifted over time, right?
Yes.
Years ago, it would have been
Definitely.
X, and now it's now it's different.
Mm-hmm.
Like as a nation, we are definitely larger as a nation, in terms of what the average size is, right? But I feel like for a lot of communities of color, it's what we consider average is maybe even a little bit different, than what that national average is. So that's interesting. And it's not even just with the representation in stories. The longest for me with clothing manufacturers, I'm like, if this is the average size, like what the hell is wrong with y'all? Why are you trying to sell me a tablecloth? Or why are you trying to make me go to the basement or to the top back corner to buy clothes? So that's, of course, that's a whole other show too. But
how dare you also charge me more, right? Because there's that whole thing around,
all of
it's
those
more
things.
Material, so we have to charge more, like just ridiculous.
So all of these things. So yeah. So that's interesting. So, okay. So one of the things that not long ago, you, Leigh, did you and Annie Charm, who also writes stories featuring plus size characters. You wrote a compelling article called Sexy is Not a Size for Blush Magazine. What prompted the collaboration between you and Annie? And what did you take away from the feedback that you got from the 15 authors who contributed their input to the article?
Well, first of all, Annie wanted to be here, but she's in the UK, so she's probably sleeping right now. But
yeah, it was midnight. It was midnight.
Yeah, Annie and I met online as two, fellow body positive authors, and we really hit it off and talked about doing a collab. And we weren't sure what that was going to be, but I really have a lot of respect for the romance reader, romance magazine, Blush. They have featured many diverse women on their cover in body and in race. And I thought if anybody was going to be receptive to this kind of topic, it would be them. And when I reached out to Megan and her team, they were absolutely all for it. So that gave Annie and I an opportunity to think, okay, well, what do we want to do here? We knew we wanted to talk about body positivity, but we didn't want to just share it from our perspective. So we thought we'll reach out to other authors and to bookstagrammers and to readers and get their thoughts on it. And so we just reached out, and the response was overwhelming. Like, I could not believe how much, which made it really challenging to try and condense all this into to an article. But the response was amazing. And so these 15 authors I'll speak about specifically, I wasn't surprised, of course, by what motivated them to write this, because you heard this from Taj and Kayla, and from me. We're writing what we know and what we experience. So that was an overarching commonality for sure. However, what really struck us as being interesting was the diversity within the diversity, right? So you had and so plus size women are not a monolith. Like, we're all very different. And so there was, plus size gay romance, plus size, Black romance, Latina romance. There was just, it was just neurodiversity romance. It was just all over the place with plus size women having all of these different representations. And so I loved learning more about that, and just the enthusiasm with which the authors were embracing this kind of representation. So it was a great experience, just wonderful.
That is awesome. Okay, so before I ask you the next question, one of the things I wanted to ask about is terminology, because I talked to Olivia Dade a while back, and Olivia Dade is, when we get into recommendations, I know she's going to be on everybody's list in terms of, so spoiler alert, Olivia Dade is one of our recommendations for authors who write plus size characters. She was very deliberate about her use of the word fat. She talks about fat representation and what have you. So what is everybody else's thoughts on that? Because I know it's something I've never used. I personally have never used, like, in any of my books, in terms of the characters thinking of themselves or calling themselves fat, because I was worried that it would be a problem for somebody else. But she very much, that is the word she likes to use when it comes to, representation and stuff for her character. So what are your thoughts for Taj? We'll start in terms of your characters in the use of the word fat.
I think they're open to it. I think, for my characters, I think, plus size, fat, fluffy, whatever word comes to mind in the moment is something that they would be open to or used to. Are accustomed to. I think that fat and the stigma around it, I think that is something that so many of us are working to combat. Fat is a reality; it's not a stigma,
right?
And so it just is what it is. My fat is fluffy, and I don't care, and that's just what it is. So it's just it's taking ownership in a word, and it's all in how you use it and the connotation behind the way you use it.
Absolutely. And Kayla, what are your thoughts about the use of the term fat?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I definitely find that I don't mind using the word fat at all, but it is definitely very triggering word for many people still. So as I'm writing, I find that I generally stay away from it only because I'm taking the consideration of my readers to mind. But not saying that Olivia doesn't do that. I think people know that what they're getting into with Olivia now, and I love her books. She inspired me so much. Her 40 Love book is one of my favorite plus size novels. And I'm always just like, yeah, girl, as I'm reading them. But then when I just over the conversations that I've had with people, and even to this day, because I use fat as a descriptor for myself, with my friends and things like that. And even the reaction it gets from my friends is very interesting. You're not fat. Why do you describe yourself that way? And it's like, fat's just a word. It's a descriptor. Right. I don't think there's, of course, anything wrong with that. I always say too, there was a trend a while ago. I feel like back in the summer where it was kind of, there were some plus size authors being very critical of using certain words to describe fat, like plus size, oh, you shouldn't be using that because what is plus size anyway? Right. And I was like, let people use what they're comfortable in the moment using because it's an evolution. I feel like you start with maybe curvy or voluptuous, and then you move to buxom, and then you move to fat, and eventually maybe one day you will be like, I'm fat, and you'll feel good about that, right? But I think use whatever feels good for you and your readers. I think everybody knows kind of once they start writing what their readers are expecting and want.
And before I ask Leigh, I'm going to ask the viewers too. What are your thoughts on it? Are you against the use of fat in a story? Would you be turned off by a story where the character refers to themselves as fat or whatever? Would that be problematic for you as a reader? That is what I'm interested in knowing. And so, Leigh, tell me about you. Is that something that you shy away from the use of the word fat? Or
no, not at all, because my very first book was called Fat Girl. So
that's right. That's right.
I wasn't afraid to use it at all. And I explain in the beginning of the book, in my note to readers, that it's about taking the word back, to taking the power back, that fat is only a bad word if somebody's using it to degrade and insult you and you're receiving it that way. But fat, as Taj and Kayla were saying, it's not, it's just a description, right? But it's kind of what we've put behind that word that has given it so much power. And I was like, no, I'm not about that. I'm not giving power to this word. And the character felt like she always had this fat girl voice in her head that was saying, I'm not good enough, I'm not skinny enough, I'm not this enough. And so no, you are absolutely perfect and beautiful as you are, and you don't have to change a damn thing, and you can embrace being fat or whatever you want to call yourself.
I love it. I love it. And I just noticed, I think, Kayla, you're broadcasting in your Facebook group too? Yay.
Yeah.
Good job. You're the first person to do that.
That's as we were setting up.
Yeah, I just saw the check at the top. How cool. Very cool.
Good job.
And so great job. You're the first person to do that. Awesome. I feel like you deserve a prize. I'm going to send you something.
Well, in my past, one of my side jobs, Taj is a cook. I used to do social media management, so
I saw that. That's right.
My social media brain is kind of always on.
Yes, I have to do this. So let me go to a few of the comments. Jennifer Copeland says, "I'm glad more authors are writing heroines like me. I have been plus size all my life." I agree with that. Okay, and here's a question from Facebook. So for our Facebook user who's asking this very excellent question, which we appreciate, we can't see your name and stuff. So if you are on Facebook, go down to the description near the bottom, and there's a link for StreamYard. If you go to that link, you can give StreamYard permission to see your name and your avatar, so we'll know who you are. But this is a fantastic question. So it says, in your books with plus size characters, do you have or address self-esteem issues, or do they have them? So we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier about whether that's the case, but I'll let each of you say whether or not your plus size characters have or address self-esteem issues. Sorry, let me go with Kayla first.
Yeah, actually, Birdie, my rock star, she very much does. And it was interesting. I've gotten quite a few reviews about her being kind of up and down about her self-confidence. I've talked about this on a couple of podcasts and stuff, but I did that intentionally because I don't ever feel like, even on my best days where I feel super confident and hot and sexy, there's still moments throughout the day where that, like, those worms get into your head, and it's like you walk past a mirror, you see a picture or something, and all of those like voices that were implanted into your brain for years and years and years, and that are still thrown in your face being on social media and TikTok
Yeah.
and stuff all the time.
Yeah.
You go, oh wait, but what if? And then you're like, no, you know. And so I was really intentional about Birdie being very much like, I'm confident and I am good at my job, and I like get bras thrown at me on stage and underwear and stuff. But like at the same time, my ex-best friend, now bodyguard, childhood best friend, is a hot ass bodyguard. He's standing in front of me. I'm naked. Oh my God. You know, and then she's like, wait a second, you know, hold on, like reel it back in, you know? So it was very much like trying to capture those moments of realism that I felt like all women, it doesn't matter like what size you are, men too, like that moment of like, I'm naked in front of somebody, you know? So very much so. Blake doesn't really rein me in. She does like maybe a tiny bit, but yeah, I felt like that was integral to Birdie's story for sure.
Awesome. Okay. And Taj, do your characters deal with any self-esteem issues?
So Zora and Haley don't, but Savvy does. Savvy goes through a really awful breakup where her ex-boyfriend blames their relationship problems on how much she works and on her weight.
I wanted to beat him up.
Everybody that reads it wants to beat him up. It's so funny because I usually get this play-by-play in my DMs from somebody, and they're like, I'm reading it now. I hate that guy, you know, and so like, but they go through it, you know, but because of him, she has a moment where her confidence is shaken and she questions whether she should, you know, do something about it or change something about herself because of what he said. And then she meets someone who has been crushing on her for longer than she knew, and realizes that she's fine just the way she is. She does have things that she wants to do for herself and in terms of self-love and self-acceptance, but she's just fine. And it just takes a minute for her to get back to being okay with herself.
Yeah. I love her journey.
Real.
Yeah, I love her journey. And Leigh, what about you? Do your characters deal with self-esteem issues?
Well, Dee did, and like I said, that was a real journey for her. But I just want to share something that I learned when I was writing the article for Blush. One of the studies, and I've just forgotten the name of the study, but I can send it to you if you like. But that said, when they looked at sort of women who read plus size romance, or books in general, that one of the things that they said was really important to them, like 80% of women who said for them, the woman going through the journey in the story is more impactful because that feels real to them. A woman who's like, I've got it all together and I know, you know, and I never doubt myself, that's harder to relate to, not to just suggest that other women cannot relate to that. But the majority of the women in this study said the journey resonates because that feels real, that feels like them, and that they have something sort of they can aspire towards, that they can work through that too to get to that better place, instead of, you know, you bounce out of bed naked and you feel so great about yourself and you don't care who sees you, right?
And and to be honest, that matter of self-esteem, I don't even think that's necessarily a plus size issue. You know what I'm saying? I just think especially in our society where there's always this, you know, chasing of perfection, and where all these different stars are portrayed on the covers of magazine, where they erase half their leg and half their hips and cinch their waist and stuff, and
Right.
people are trying to aspire to something that's not even reality. You know, so I feel like that's probably an issue for a whole lot of folks, whether it's as Mary Margaret said, you know, being super skinny and feeling like you're not enough, or even if you have the size maybe that so many of us would envy or whatever, maybe you feel like, you know, there's dimples in your thighs or whatever it is. There's always kind of this self-esteem thing that people are dealing with. So yeah, and I would say for me, the character who's portrayed as plus size on the cover of the book, Here's Until Midnight, it's not that she has self-esteem issues so much as, I mean, well, let me put it this way. I will say this. One of the things in the beginning definitely is she kind of dressed in clothing that was kind of like designed to kind of like not really highlight her body and stuff. But that was more out of when she was younger and started developing more quickly than her classmates and stuff, the boys teasing her and stuff, and made her very self-conscious about her body. And that was more about why she started to do that, that kind of thing. So yeah, but I think that probably is just like you said, a part of like how we talked about earlier, how being plus size or whatever the experience of the character is, should color how they view the world and how they go through it. So that makes sense that a lot of them would have to deal with some of these issues as well. And on the question of whether or not readers use fat or are okay with the use of fat or whatever, Jennifer Copeland says that she does use fat to describe herself all the time. Let me go back. Okay, so Reclamation Yoga, it says, I am not against the use of fat in books, but I have been conditioned to think of it negatively, unfortunately. I generally say bigger bodies in case someone is sensitive to the term fat. And that's pretty much how I've always looked at it too. Like, and to be honest, I don't, and usually when I use it personally, the term, it's more like in teasing, you know, like I might talk about myself as fat or say my husband has a fat ass, you know what I'm saying, or whatever. So like I more use it like that. So, but because it does, you know, has always had this kind of negative connotation, and so it's something that we have to work toward looking at differently. So, thank you for sharing that. And the question before about self-esteem, that was LaShawn Hawks who asked us that question. So thank you, LaShawn, for asking that question. Okay, and Jennifer said, exactly, I feel the same way. I'm learning now at 50 years old to embrace all of me, and I am working on my self-esteem. So love that.
Love that. Love that.
Okay, so now let's get into recommendations. So this is for viewers too, if you have recommendations of books that have plus size or characters with different body types. And you know, again, when we're talking about different body types, I want to include everybody, so not just men, the women, but also the male characters. You know, sometimes or other characters that they're and not just characters identified as a heroine, to be plus size as well, or maybe even skinny or whatever, or not tall or whatever it is, a diverse body type. So we're gonna go with some recommendations, and I'm gonna start with Kayla. What are some of your recommendations for stories that you would recommend where the characters have diverse body types and maybe body positivity is a part of the story?
Yeah, I mean, I already mentioned one, 40 Love. I love that book by Olivia Dade. It's her like indie author days. That's my favorite one by far, I think, out of all the books that she's read or written. And then another one that I love, and it's like a short novel. It's called Alpha's Prey. I'm looking at it on my phone because I had to make sure I got the names right. By Renee Rose and Lisa Vino. It's like this. It's a bear shifter.
Oh, okay.
So the guy's nice and husky too, so that you've got some representation with him. And then also like what else do I love books by? I also like Lillian Lark's books, her monster books, Entranced by the Basilisks, or not Entranced by the Basilisks. Sorry, that was the wrong one. She has a gargoyle book. I don't remember the name. Anyway, those are a couple of them, and then another quick one too, The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy. She's described as buxom, so she's not plus size, but she's tall also, which I'm tall. So anytime a woman is tall in a book, because I'm 5'10", I'm like, yes.
Yes. Me too.
Yeah.
Because usually it's like, she's petite and tiny. You
Right.
put her over your shoulder. you know?
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. I love it. Okay. And Leigh, what are some of the recommendations you would make for books that have good body diversity representation and body positivity representation?
Well, I'll certainly get on the 40 Love bandwagon. That's a great one. Jenny Howe, who's sort of newer to romance. She's starting off though very well on the plus side. So she's written some good stuff. I gotta say Danielle Jackson, she writes some great stuff. And of course my girl Annie Charm. All of her books are very much body positive, and she does have some that struggle with with body image, and others that are just confident and go after it. So those are, and Twyla Turner, even though she writes kind of all over the place, a lot of very different kind of books there, but always around diversity, and she's done some body positive as well. So love all of them. And of course, I'll have to check out Taj and Kayla, because their books sound wonderful.
Oh, they're fantastic. They're fantastic. Yeah, definitely. Okay. And Taj, what are some of your recommendations for authors or stories that have good body diversity and plus size representation?
I'll go authors, because I feel like most of the ones that I'm going to recommend have multiple stories that are body positive. I would start with Denise Williams. I would definitely say, and second, Danielle Jackson. I literally just blurbed something for her yesterday. I would say Cherish Reed. I would say Kennedy Ryan. Obviously Olivia Dade and Julie Murphy. I'm fans of both of them. Talia Hibbert. I could keep going. So I'm going to stop there, but certainly there's a great growing list, and that makes me very happy.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, I would agree. And, obviously I'm putting on the list these three ladies, Taj, Savvy McCoy. I absolutely love that book, and I do have it right here. I love this book so much. So yes, that was a fantastic book. And we mentioned Talia Hibbert. Her books are amazing as well. Laquette writes lots of characters with plus size, and she makes sure she also has those plus size characters on the covers. And these books are so great. And Saracia Glass has that one about the con.
Yes, Love Con.
The name of it. It's called, what is it called?
I think it's called Love Con.
Love Con. Okay. I love that book. That's another really great one that has plus size representation. Rebecca Weatherspoon has some thickums men, and that's something I think we don't talk about enough. So she has, definitely has men who are big, burly, plus size guys, which I appreciate. I already mentioned Danielle Jackson and Denise Williams, and of course Olivia Dade, deemed the queen right now, writing these great plus size characters, unapologetically plus size characters. So, and then I think somebody had mentioned another book. I think it was Mary Margaret. Says the book was called A Whole Lot of Love, and the cover has a cartoon woman who is curvy. And that, I don't know who the author is, but that's another title that has plus size characters. So thank y'all so much for all of this. So next, let me ask each of you this question. Let's start with Taj. what can we expect from you next?
Well, the anthology comes out in 2 weeks, and then my next novel is called The Good Ones Are Taken, and that one comes out next spring in 2024. I do have something contracted for 2025, and so hopefully we'll be adding to that list very soon.
Awesome. And Kayla, what's next for you?
I still have to publish the second book of Wish, because I put that on the back burner for 4 years. Sorry, readers. And but I also have, of course, I'm gonna write the second book of the Cowboy series. But I've recently been noodling around on a spicy Christmas novella, maybe written under a pen name, so I could go real crazy.
Yeah.
No, totally own it, Kayla. Go crazy.
That's pretty cool.
We'll see what happens. I was like, can I write like, a novella in a weekend? Let me see what I can do.
I love it. And Leigh, what about you? What's coming up next for you?
June 27th, I have an Imperfect Seduction coming out. Really excited about that one. And following that, still to be named, but that one is going to feature a husky man. So I'm excited about that. I just started to write the first few chapters of that one. And I want to try my hand at a novella about maybe a curvy dancer and sort of how she's, and I don't know, but that I'm just playing with some ideas there. So that's the plan.
Love it.
Leigh, you have to look up Thick Enterprises. I just went this weekend to their erotic dance show for bodies that are never seen in erotic dancing.
Okay.
It was great. It was awesome. It was all different people, all colors, shapes, sizes, like pole dancing, people are making it rain. It was great. So look up Thick Enterprises. I think it is on Instagram. You'll get lots of inspiration.
Oh, I love it. There we go. I love it. Okay. Love it. And a couple more recommendations. Vashti Harrison's Big. And then there was a question asked before about recs for young readers. And I don't have any recs that I can think of right off the top of my head. Oh, yes, I do. Talia Hibbert has a YA.
She does.
Coming out. I forget, it's like suspiciously highly something suspicious and suspiciously cute or something like that. It's Talia Hibbert's. And then Rebecca Weatherspoon also has a YA coming out. And that's in addition to Kayla recommended Julia Murphy.
Julia for some reason.
Yeah. Julie Murphy has mid-grade. So there you go for that. And then the clarification on the Whole Lot of Love. It was an anthology with Brenda Jackson, Donna Hill, Monica Johnson, and Frances Ray that had short stories plus size.
There's also a middle grade anthology called Everybody Shines. And that one is specifically about plus size kids and different obstacles and things that they come up against.
Oh, cool.
And so it's a great anthology edited by Cass Newbold.
Love it. Thank you for that recommendation. Okay, so tell everybody how they can get in touch with you. And I'm going to say this in advance that their information, their website, and their Amazon pages are linked in the description of the show. But Leigh, tell us how people can stay in touch with you.
Okay, so I'm really new to social media. I have resisted, and then I realized, okay, that's silly. I've got to get in on it. So anyway, so you can now find me at Leigh Carron author for Instagram, and on Facebook, Leigh with the space, not the space, like using the space bar, Carron. You can find me there, and that's all I'm doing right now.
That's good. It's better to find just like what works for you and what you're comfortable with and stay with that. So that's cool. All right, and Taj next.
Yeah, so I have a website, tajmccoywrites.com. On Twitter, I'm at Taj McCoy Writes. On Instagram, I'm at The One Who Will. On Facebook, Taj McCoy Writes. On TikTok, Taj McCoy. So pretty much if you'll just look for Taj McCoy, you'll find me.
And Kayla.
On Twitter, I'm at Kayla Grosse, and on Instagram, I'm at Kayla Writes Life, and on TikTok, I'm at Kayla Grosse Writer, I think.
Oh my God, y'all are making me think.
I'm like, it's so
hard.
bad.
My poor assistant had to look like trying to find you.
I know. I'm so bad.
All different.
And you're me, like when I used to have clients, I'm like, make sure your name's all the
The
same.
same.
And
On
I
every
did mine all
platform.
different. And then on Facebook, I think it's just Kayla Grosse. And then I have a readers group, Kayla Holics.
Oh, I like
Wow,
it.
that's
That's
cute.
cute. I like it. I like it. I like it. Well, it's been a great chat, and another the clarification. Thank you so much, Paris. The Talia Hibbert book is highly suspicious and unfairly cute. That's what it's called. It's such a cute name. Like I said, I still don't remember Rebecca, the name of Rebecca. So I just shared it on Twitter today too, because it's coming out soon or in a few months or whatever. And so I just shared Rebecca, but Rebecca Weatherspoon has one. And I love her books and I love her voice. So I can't wait to see what she does in the YA space. And then another recommendation, not quite Snow White.
No.
So thank y'all. So thank you all of you for being here and for sharing your stories and what made you get into writing, body diversity and what have you. And thank you all for being here. Thanks so much, LaShawn. We appreciate you all for being here. And thank you. Embracing the positive vibes. Thank you, ladies, for the positive reinforcement. Thank y'all. And thank you all for being here and for your great comments, because you make the show what it is. So my next show will be in 2 weeks. Like approximately 2 weeks. June 6th, I think it is. I am talking to author Rollo Z. Adams. I don't know what we're talking about yet. We're still figuring it out. But we're going to be chatting because I don't care. As long as I'm talking to her, I'm cool. So thank you all for being here. Hope you have a great evening. And again, don't forget to like and share the show. Subscribe so you can be here for the next one. We appreciate you so much. Have a good evening and happy reading.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Reese.
You're welcome. I'm so glad to have you all here.